Hello, English 102 students. This is your professor, Michael Bloomberg, and the purpose of this video is to provide you some lecture notes that I think will help you as you're working through the readings this week. So I'm on Blackboard, and I'm going to go ahead and go down to the course content folder and click on the Week 2 folder. As you can see, I've already added a video for Week 2 that will walk you through the coursework and what I'm looking for you to complete this week. So please check that out if you've not done so yet. But we're going to go down to readings, and this is what we're going to focus on, is just looking through the information that we have and making sure that the information makes sense. So the Stanford Prison Experiment is where we're going to start. And if I could pull up a Word document, there's just some general information that I would like to share with you that I think you'll find helpful. And I want to go to the home key and expand the size of this just a little bit so everyone can see. So just some key things to know about the Stanford Prison Experiment. First of all, it was conducted in 1971 by a gentleman named Philip Zimbardo. Now, Zimbardo was a social psychologist who was influenced by gentlemen such as Solomon Asch, who did line experiments dating back to the late 1950s, which really set the stage for Stanley Milgram, who did a very famous shock experiment in the early part of the 1960s. So these were the gentlemen that came before Zimbardo and influenced him as far as this experiment was concerned. And Zimbardo kind of takes what Milgram did with the shock experiments and goes a step further in creating an actual mock scenario involving prisoners and guards. And so we'll take a look at the information, but that's just something I wanted to share with you quickly. And you can Google to look at a photo of Zimbardo. He is still alive, by the way. He is getting a little bit on in age at this point. But let's go ahead and click on the first link, which brings us to the web link from a website called Simply Psychology. And it's from there that you'll get some of the particulars of the event. The procedure, for example, there were 70 applicants who answered the ad for this experiment. It was a paid experiment. Participants who were selected, chosen from 75 volunteers, were paid $15 per day to partake in the experiment. Now again, this is early 1970s money, so you need to keep that in mind. It's not really even a lot of money then, but for folks who are looking to make a little bit of money over the summer, especially these male college students, gave them a little something to do and a little way to make some money. And so 24 male students were eventually selected, and the roles were designated according to 10 prisoners and 11 guards. So they were the ones who were chosen to actually partake in the experiment. One of the things that you'll find is that the experiment did get out of hand as it unfolded. Now, Zimbardo actually served as the mock warden, so I'll leave you to decide what you think about that. Someone who's conducting the experiment actually takes part in the experiment. Now, there were a total of 50 independent researchers who were with Zimbardo, albeit observing from the outside, but they didn't really intervene or find anything immorally wrong there. So here's the PowerPoint. And again, I did not put this together, and yes, you will find some typos in it. I could not fix those typos. Giovanni Vivanani was the actual person who deserves credit for putting this together. But it's pretty well done. It shows the original ad, which I think is interesting. It gives the breakdown and how this also ties into something called Abu Ghraib, which was a prison scandal that happened during the second Iraqi war. And so I think you'll find that interesting. Again, a breakdown. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks, but it actually ended after the 6th day. So you might want to note that. Real policemen were involved in the arrest of the prisoners. That was pretty interesting. I don't want to go through all of this because I know you can read it on your own. I'm just kind of looking at the highlights here. One of the things, let me scroll down, that I wanted to pinpoint on. Prisoner 819 is interesting because Prisoner 819 refused initially to follow through with a lawyer to get parole. He was feeling sick, and he is actually the one who is subject to the chance, which you'll find in the YouTube link video. I really like that this PowerPoint links you out to very real parts of the experiment. The parole board's organized the next day, and particularly interesting is Christina Malash was a graduate student who is brought in to interview the folks that are partaking in the experiment, but she was so outraged that she objected to the conditions of the prison, and I won't get into the graphic reasons why. You'll find that out as you look closer at the experiment. But really interesting to notice that she ended up marrying Zimbardo. So, kind of an interesting twist to the experiment. And none of the other 50 actually had any objection to its morality as it was unfolding, which is kind of interesting. Kind of reminds me of the book Lord of the Flies, for any of you who may have read that particular book. No consent form was signed by the participants. So you could talk about the moral consequences in this week's discussion board, if you like, about what you think of the experiment. Now, Zimbardo had access to all videos and data and was able to publish his results without being questioned about them. Also very interesting. Now, I didn't go too far with the Abu Ghraib prison abuse scandal, which happened in March 2003. You might want to look at that. I will warn you, the photos of that scandal are very graphic because it does contain nude photos of prisoners. So if that is a problem for you, do not look at it. But it is a part of history, recent history at that. I guess we're looking at about 15 years ago now. This information is posted by someone who was actually a part, or allegedly, I should say, a part of the 1971 experiment, which is pretty interesting. And it contains some interview aspects and some follow-up. And also gives you some information on similar experiments, including the Milgram experiment. Now, if you were in my English 101 class, we looked at the Milgram experiment last semester, if you were in my class. That just kind of follows up on that particular experiment. And a little comedic relief there in the form of a cartoon. And then, of course, the sources that the researcher used in putting together this PowerPoint. So hopefully you'll find it helpful. I'll be interested in reading your viewpoints on the discussion board. Also, I want to warn you that there's the potential for some graphic information and content. But also in the early 2000s, there was something called the McDonald's strip search scandal. You can find that on Wikipedia, which might be the safest place to find that. And you can find out more information. I'm not looking to expose you to any graphic content, but it does tie into the course content that we're looking at. So that's Zimbardo. A really interesting experiment. And again, I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Switch gears and look at argumentative writing for just a moment. And this is the first file that you'll find. And the first thing that you'll find is the purpose of argument writing is to present a position and have an audience adopt or at least seriously consider your argument. And when we use the term argument, I want to go back here, and I know this is Zimbardo here, but I want to switch gears a little bit. And I want to stress to you, not or a shouting match, but think more in terms of persuasion. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about persuasive writing. And I like that this handout gives information related to what the writer should be aware of and what the audience is doing as far as functioning in the writing, including being aware of the audience and the language and the tone. Opposition, you need to be aware of that when you structure an argument, that you're going to have those who have opposing sides to your argument. And it's important to acknowledge that in an argumentative piece of writing. And then also in this handout, and I can say this because I didn't put it together, it also gives you information about the writing, and a thesis statement is outlined, for example. And we'll go into more details regarding thesis next week in week 3. The organization, the conclusion, and the reasoning is really critical because it walks you through some logical fallacies. Be familiar with terms like hasty generalization, begging the question, false analogy, a non sequitur, which just means it does not follow, or when a statement is not logically connected to another, a red herring, post hoc, which means after this, therefore because of this, which means chronologically does not equal causality, slippery slope, oversimplification, ad hominem, which means against the man. That's where one attacks the person rather than the argument. You see that, by the way, quite a bit in politics, but I won't go into that now. Save that lecture for another day. Part 2, and again, I'm just hitting the high notes here. Argumentative essay uses reasoning and evidence, not emotion, to take a definitive stand on a controversial or debatable issue. The essay explores two sides of a topic and proves why one side or position is the best. And it gives you the first steps, the body paragraphs, and final steps in revising. And also really cool is the fact that it gives you a sample argumentative essay. I am often asked by students, can I see a sample? Can I see what it looks like in play? And so that's what this allows you to do, which also uses MLA documentation, which we'll be looking at very soon, which should be a refresher for those of you who had English 101, but it does give you kind of the walkthrough of that. And in case you're wondering, this semester you are going to be asked to write argumentative essays. So the first one's coming up just around the corner. We'll start looking at more details of that when we get into week 3. Alright folks, that's the lecture video this week. Hopefully it didn't bore you too much, and hopefully you found some things helpful in the video. As always, feel free to email me if you have any questions. And I want to wish you the best of luck as you move forward in week 2 in English 102.